I'm talking about Rolling Thunder.
When we talk about a decade from a pop culture perspective, we're usually talking about a 3 or 4 year period slap bang in the middle of a decade. The early 70s culturally kind of felt like the 60s. The early 90s felt a lot like the 80s, but with slightly muted colours, which plants the flag of the January 1984 debut of Stephen J. Cannell's Riptide firmly into the abdomen of that decade, which is no surprise, as in many ways this show was a summation of a decade's worth of TV shows blended into one entertaining, under-discussed and frankly bonkers package. Welcome back to another episode of Rolling Thunder, the 1980s action TV video podcast. I'm your host Mike from ChinStroker VS Punter and the Rewatch Project, and today we will be setting our sights on the pilot episode of Riptide, a thrilling action-packed series that combined detective work, humour and high-octane adventure on the sunny shores of Southern California. But before we get into the details, let's take a moment to set the scene. Riptide first premiered on January the 3rd, 1984. The show followed the adventures of three friends and former army buddies, Cody Allen, Nick Ryder and Murray Boz Basinski, who used their collective skills to run a private detective agency aboard their boat, the Riptide. Oh, and there was a friggin' robot. After initially airing on Saturday nights, Riptide was then moved to Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. following the A-Team and right before Remington Steele. That made Tuesdays on NBC the hottest night of the week for action-adventure lovers and represented the zenith of the genre. This installment, titled Pilot, was written by the show creators Stephen J. Cannell and Frank Lupo, whose work I've covered 2 videos ago on the pilot episode of the A-Team. And this was directed by Christian Nyby Jr., a giant of 70s and 80s TV direction, having held episodes of Ironside, The $6 Million Man, The Rockford Files, Chips, Battlestar Galactica, The Fall Guy, Knight Rider, The A-Team, Simon & Simon, TJ Hooker, Scarecrow, Mrs. King, and Moonlighting. In fact, the peak run of Nyby's career was the classic run of television that started with Ironside and Rockford Files and essentially concluded with Moonlighting, which blew up the genre in the mid-80s. But more on that in a moment. In this first pilot episode, we're introduced to Cody, Nick and Boz as they embark on their very first case together. When an old Navy buddy's yacht is stolen, the trio sets out to recover the vessel, unwittingly getting themselves entangled in a dangerous web of intrigue and international smuggling. With the odds stacked against them, our heroes must rely on their wit, resourcefulness and unwavering loyalty to crack the case and save the day. Riptide was commissioned as a direct response to the success of the A-Team the year earlier. The network wanted another show to follow the A-Team and shore up their Tuesday night offering.
Tuesday on the A-Team, Mr. T falls for an African beauty, but when she's abducted, he goes headhunting. And the Riptide guys have a client, but
the man is dead.
So who's trying to cream Cody? Knock off Nick. Then Remington Steele protects a singer who's tired of being dumped on. But is this case Laura's swan song?
Tuesday.
What is interesting looking at Riptide now is that it was very much a transitional show. A final gasp before the genre transformed into the more cinematic, postmodern MTV cops of Miami Vice and the meta fourth wall-breaking genre deconstruction of its Tuesday night competitor, Moonlighting. But Riptide and Cannell's other shows also had a wry sense of humour and the broad feeling that their characters knew they were in a TV show. In fact, one of the final episodes of the show, If You Can't Beat 'Em, Join 'Em, featured our heroes consulting on a TV show that was clearly modelled on Moonlighting, the show that essentially killed this genre of unironic action shows. Another interesting element of the show is how much of an amalgamation it was of prior shows, and not only those of Cannell's. Philip DeGuerre, Glenn Larson and Donald Belisario, himself a protege of Cannell and a contemporary of Larson, had been influenced greatly by Cannell's Rockford Files with shows like Magnum P.I., The Fall Guy and Simon & Simon. But these influences would they themselves feed back into Cannell's Riptide, which featured bantering leads akin to the Chalk and Cheese brothers of Simon & Simon and the Dudes of Leisure in Paradise as seen in Magnum P.I. In fact, the technology craze of the early 80s highlighted in war games and very specifically in DeGuerre's WizKids show from the previous year would also feature. The robots of Star Wars was still in vogue despite the film series ending the prior year. Also due to leaps in home computer technology that made the once exotic technology seem somehow more attainable. From WizKids to Rocky IV to Seven's Arc 7 in the westernised version of G-Force, Battle of the Planets, no fad was left untouched in Riptide, and that also extended to the vehicles.
We now return to Nightboat, the crime-solving boat.
Faster, Nightboat! We've got to catch those starfish poachers!
You don't have to yell, Michael. I'm all around you.
There are touches of the Simpsons parody Nightboat here, as Riptide in many ways was the pinnacle, as well as the dying gasp of the low-violence, breezy action show cycle that started with Rockford Files and would transform with Miami Vice and Moonlighting. Rockford had his Firebird, Magnum had his Ferrari, and Hardcastle and McCormack had the Coyote, but the Riptide guys have a fleet of vehicles, from the 1960 Corvette to the titular yacht and its companion speedboat, the Ebbtide, to the pink helicopter, the Screaming Meanie, which was a Nick Sikorsky T-58T, and was originally a Navy helicopter from the 1960s. Still used today as a heavy goods carrier, the Mimi requires the obligatory dashboard bash to get it going, of course. The vehicle's echo the show's pawn shop for not leaving any stone unturned. The vehicular action is not as extreme as it would be in other Cannell shows, such as the A-Team and particularly the high-jumping Hardcastle and McCormick, but these vehicles have plenty of opportunities to make this 10-year-old drool into his cornflakes. Airwolf started the same season, and Blue Thunder and Street Hawk were not that far behind, so we can see that the fascination with vehicles was definitely peaking in 1984. The show features a breezy patter between the leads, who are the latest in a long line of Peter Pan complexes that became popular after the premiere of Magnum P.I., whose lineage could be traced back to Jim Rockford and beyond. The addition of the geeky Boz character offsets the bromance nicely, and the fact that he's respected and treated well by them is a nice touch, and is the antithesis of the Revenge of the Nerds of the era. The salivating over the female guest stars, including Marla Heasley, who would also show up in a recurring role on the A-Team soon after, and the boatload of escorts aboard the Barefoot Contessa boat has not aged so well. Even at the time, with the rise of popularity of shows like Cagney and Lacey, this was starting to feel a little dated. But their chemistry is natural, and it's interesting to see a partnership based solely on friendship and not a military fraternity like the A-Team or family in shows like Simon and Simon. Bray brings a fun, Crispin Glover-esque energy to Boz, and it's also great to see Cannell stalwart Jack Ging show up as a gnarly police detective. Ging was such a favourite of Cannell's, he would show up multiple times as multiple characters on the A-Team, including as Colonel Fulbright, the last of the team's recurring pursuers, who would have the dubious honour of having the only on-screen death in that show's notoriously death-free run. Some other memorable moments in the pilot are a car chase featuring our heroes in their tidy whities, the recurring jokes about Boz not knowing how to make a fist to punch someone, the ongoing broken nose tally between the leads, and Rick telling their beautiful client that Cody has hepatitis. Family entertainment in the 80s, people. There is also a neat little parallel to the Jack Nicholson film The Last Detail, where we learn that the two friends treated Boz to a night on the town when he was in their custody in their old lives as military police. As has been the case with all of the pilots I've covered so far, three conventions that this show adheres to are present. Being a feature-length movie of the week, there's no opening credit sequence as well. When the show would go to series, we had a classic Mike Post scored Cannell opening credits that highlight the sheer amount of ideas in the show. And adds an appropriately Beach Boys-esque middle eight to the usual Mike Post pomp. It also uses clips from the show over the end credits style that was common at the time, with the length of the clips and the end credits music varying from one episode to another depending on if the show ran long or if it ran short that week. It also has a runtime of 100 minutes, meaning that it could be split for broadcast if needs be. And it was watching this show that made me first come to the realisation that I was a geek. My friends all loved the A-Team and Knight Rider and all of those shows. We all did. Every kid did in the mid-1980s. But like all enthusiasts, there was that moment when I realised that my interest cut just that little bit deeper than everybody else on the playgrounds. I remember in the late 70s being baffled that my school friends were not as enthusiastic as I about the making of Star Wars airing that night on network TV. And Riptide is another example of that. A number of American TV shows were bought by the commercial TV station ITV in the UK to fill out the schedules. And Riptide was aired daytime during the week. I first caught an episode when I was off school sick one day and immediately realised it was in my wheelhouse and started getting my parents to video record it for me. I was literally the only person at my school who had heard of this show, and as soon as I saw the familiar Cannell logo, you know, the ripping the paper and throwing it in the air, saw Mike Post's name and instinctively understood that it was of the ilk of shows that I like. It felt like a secret gift that I'd received from America that only I knew about. I bought the dinky red Corvette toy and that was it for me. There were no annuals, no toys, no conversations on the playground, just a few episodes of a fun show that popped up during the barren daytime TV scape of English TV for a few months there in the 1980s. And for that reason, for the formative effect that had on my realization that I like these things just that little bit more than my friends, I will always have a soft spot for Riptide. A really fun show. The pilot is available upon YouTube. I'm not sure what the legality of that is, but do go and check it out. And while you're checking that out, please leave comments and likes for this video. Please subscribe, share with your friends. Please do feel free to send me emails to rollingthundervideoshow@gmail.com. Check out ChinStroker VS Punter and the Rewatch Project, my other shows. And I look forward to hearing from you and even getting some suggestions about episodes of shows or shows themselves to cover at a future point. So thank you very much and enjoy.
I'm talking about rolling thunder.